Hi, Jenny. How are you doing today?
Hi, Lori. I'm doing pretty well. Looking forward to this conversation.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna have a good conversation today. And today we're talking about the Leo full moon. Of course, before we go there, we're gonna say the regular things of please like our video, please subscribe, and please share and write us little comments. We love your comments. We do our best to respond. So also I just want to say thank you all for being here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sounds good.
with that out of the way, our next thing is we're talking about the full moon. And when we talk about any of the full moons, the new moons, whatever moons, we're talking about the cycles, right? And there is a monthly cycle of the moon phases. The full moon is the one that is about the full illumination. We see something that hasn't been seen before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the full moon is the one that everybody knows about. Even if you don't really pay much attention to the moon or whatever, you can all probably recall many moments of your life looking up in the sky and seeing that beautiful full moon.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like it's the highlight of the whole moon phase business.
Yeah,
So,
it
mhm.
is. It's the full illumination. It's the highlight. A lot of people also know it because oftentimes a lot of people struggle to sleep during full moons because there's something about that that just kind of wakes us up.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting too with the full moon. So that's when the sun and the moon are completely opposite of each other, meaning the earth is in the middle, with the sun on one side and the moon on the other side. And that actually does have a pretty big effect on the gravitational pull, and it
Mm,
creates kind of a bulge in the tides of the earth. And we're full of water, all of us. So it's really interesting. It's kind of a no-brainer that it has an impact on multiple levels because we all have those crazy full moon stories
yeah, we
of
do.
things going haywire. So.
And
Mhm.
usually we talk about the cycle, the new moon that happened 2 weeks ago. If you're tracking the moon phases, you know when the new moons are and the full moons. But the one thing I really do want to point us to is the longer cycle. And
Mm.
the longer cycle brings us back to the Leo new moon, which was on August 16th.
Mhm.
Is that right? What
That's
was
correct.
so the one way to think about this is to think about what began in your life at that new moon and
Mhm.
thinking of this as an illumination of the process that began back in August. What
Mhm.
was interesting about that new moon period? Do you remember, Jenny?
Oh yeah. So this is when Venus was retrograde. Venus retrograded in Leo, and this was when it was in the middle of that. And so it was a tumultuous time for a lot of folks, especially with their relationships and maybe with financial things and things to do with values and aesthetics and things to do with women. That's when that Barbie movie came out. That got a lot of sort of accolades of I don't know, highlighting those sorts of things. So that's what was going on. So you may remember August 16th as being a time of kind of in the thick of some of that stuff. And it was very tumultuous. So extra memorable, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
if you, I always think people who study astrology would do really well to keep a journal so that you can go back to that period of time and really get an idea of what you were thinking about, maybe a project you started or something that was really beginning, bubbling up in your mind, and see how far that has progressed in this 6 months, because
Hmm.
this is the time of illuminating from that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and so for the shorter cycle, it starts with the January 11th Capricorn new moon. It was at 20 degrees of Capricorn. And it's always funny to think of, the new moon being in that serious, project oriented, like task motivated Capricorn, where it's all about laying out a plan and getting clear about what you wanted to do and kind of being with these more serious and concrete, and tangible types of projects and things in your mind because Capricorn's a place where we are all working to mature and taking responsibility for things. So
Mhm.
to have that somber, serious starting point, and then we have this Leo full moon, and Leo is pretty different from Capricorn, wouldn't you say, Lori?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
Quite different.
Mhm. Yeah. So Leo is a fixed fire sign. So we are talking about a very warm, sparkly sign that is very personable, is very charismatic. There's a little bit of like kind of like leadership qualities there, though more the leadership of like the sovereign. You know, it has the
Mm.
archetype of a monarch, like a king or a queen, is what is associated with Leo.
As
Nothing that
opposed to the CEO, which is the Capricorn, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah. So there's more of a celebratory, dramatic kind of let's go ahead and be a showstopper type of energy to Leo. So it really is a funny counterpoint to that Capricorn new moon. And then also now we are in Aquarius season. So the sun is in Aquarius and the moon is serving as a counterpoint to that Aquarius sun. So,
Right.
mhm.
So here we are. Let's talk about Leo some more.
Yeah, good idea.
Do you know anything about Leo?
No. Both Leos here, very different kinds of Leos. I mean, Leo is the sun. Is the sun rules Leo. So this is all sun principles, shining out, radiating, showing your personality, being willing to be humorous, being up on the stage and being dramatic and holding everybody's attention. Like part of Leo's job is to capture attention. When it's operating in a more balanced way, it's doing that to radiate out generosity. When it's not balanced, it's much more egotistical and all about me, and look at me in the spotlight. And that's where it gets its kind of negative reputation from. But those are some of the things that I think about Leo. What do you have to add to that?
Well,
Leo.
yeah, I mean, everything you said. And I think it's really important when you're listening to our videos, make sure you've got your chart in hand, if at all possible. And it's important to know where Leo falls in your own chart, because that's the area where you get to shine, regardless of where your sun is. Your sun can be in any of the 12 signs, and your sun will still be most authentically expressed in the house that holds Leo. Okay, so yeah, Leo is really about self-expression. And like all the signs have an immature side to them and a more, advanced, a more positive side.
Mhm.
So like Jenny said, the positive side of Leo, I think the best part of Leo is the generosity and the open-heartedness. And if you have planets in Leo, you want to really pay attention and really double down on your insistence for yourself to be in integrity about how you use those planets. Because on the flip side, Leo can be very selfish and very arrogant. And, all the negative side of Leo is a pretty ugly thing to behold. And you don't want to be expressing that stuff. You want to be expressing a lot of generosity and open-heartedness, and
Mhm.
keep that as the focus. That's the great part of Leo.
Mhm. And let's be real, when those ugly sides of Leo are showing up, really what's going on is a deep insecurity. It's really when, on a deep level, you are feeling insecure about whatever's going on in your life or in your personality or what have you. But that's really what it's showing. And so the more puff and chest thumping you see, the more there's just a little scared little child trying
Right.
to get attention. And so that attention seeking is part of that whole setup. So bear
I,
that in mind.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Jenny. It reminded me of the very first astrologer I ever went to, I ever saw. I don't know how old I was, probably 19 or something. And I went to an astrologer, and she was a old woman, probably 10 years younger than I am now. But at any rate, she was an old woman, and she looked at my chart, and she talked about exactly what you were just saying. She talked about the fact that of all the signs, Leo has a tendency to have this real deep fear of being invisible.
Mm.
And it's that invisibility, that fear of invisibility, that creates that overblown expression when it's really being used in a negative way. And I've thought about that a lot over the years. There is a real insecurity that Leo can spend an awful lot of time trying to hide
Yeah.
until
Yeah,
they
and
can
it's just
find that point of generosity. I think
Mhm.
finding an inner core of generosity
Mhm.
is when Leo can make a shift. And it
Yeah.
can be a very dramatic shift.
Yeah, it's interesting because you think about the Leo and the sun being the thing you shine out the most, but what you're talking about is a process in life where you have to go in and do your internal work, where you have to get to know yourself and understand what it even means to be an authentic you, and then shine out from that place. And it's part of the human process, and I was just thinking it's not to kind of demonize, oh, you're feeling insecure. It's about recognizing that's normal to feel insecure and then having to work with it. And what the difference is when you turn to face it and you're willing to deal with it versus trying to pretend it's not there and stuff it down and keep being the king and walking around, the emperor wears no clothes comes to mind. So it's funny because I do think that about fire signs, like that they're so external in a lot of ways, but in another funny way, they really refer to that deepest spark inside that is your life force. And so there's something very powerful about understanding that connection. Because we are mostly talking about kind of outward expression, but there's always an inward face to all of these things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Mhm.
So find where Leo
Yeah.
is in your chart and find generosity
Yeah.
there. Okay.
I want to add one more thing. The other thing I really like about Leo that I forget to bring up a lot is the creativity.
Oh, yeah.
I create is kind of a Leo phrase, and I've tended to focus more on how Leo radiates out generosity and energy, and that's great. But also this creative
Mm,
power to create your life. And
mm,
since we're talking about the place in your life that your sun, whatever sign it's in, rules the Leo place of your life, you're really talking about how you create your life. And that's
mm.
part of that process and access
That's
those
awesome.
creative potential. So cool. All
Thank you
right.
for that. That's very important, that creativity piece. Okay, let's open up the chart itself. And here we have it.
On the chart.
Okay, we've got some good fiery colors here to look at, to think about, because this
Yes.
is a fire sign. All right, what do we see? Wow.
Well, first of all, right?
It's so interesting how, yeah, that Leo full moon is kind of all by itself on one side of everything else is kind of crowded together.
Yeah, I mean, I was the first time I opened this chart, I like to do this thing, Lori. I don't know if you do this too, where it's like you open the chart and just instantaneously, what do you notice before you go
Mm,
analyzing or whatever else? And of course, for me, it was just instantaneously this such different energy, this Leo, bright, shiny, radiant, generous, playful energy as kind of an offset to so many other, I don't know, very kind of dry, cerebral energies, and then just a lot of earth and water, which is very yin and settling
mm,
and grounding, which is wonderful energy, but it's really nice to have this just bright, sparkly counterpoint right in the middle of
mm.
in the northern hemisphere, the winter is something to look at and picture the warmth that's coming down the road. So that was my first instinct.
Nice.
What about you?
Well, no,
Yeah.
I don't quite think of it quite that way.
Mhm. Oh, good.
But
That's why we're doing these together.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things that kind of jumps out at me immediately when I look at this chart is the all that earth, all the trine aspects going on between the earth planets that I feel like are very supportive of this this dynamic statement of this full moon. And we've got Pluto. We've got Pluto.
Mhm. Yeah, that was the next thing is, I mean, we've talked extensively about Pluto going into Aquarius. It
Right.
happened on January 20th. And the sun immediately was with that Pluto just before it went into Aquarius. So it's really hard to talk about any of this without revisiting that topic. And just as a reminder, go back and watch our Pluto into Aquarius video, go back to the Aquarius season video, just to get a little more understanding of this very powerful, potent energy that to me kind of has set up this Aquarius season as I've been thinking about a freight train, just woof, this massive behind the scenes powerhouse of energy that's going on and coming into a new area of our lives for all of us.
Yeah.
So.
And another thing around that freight train idea that I think is so apt here is that within, I think, 2 days after the full moon, I might be off by a little bit, but Uranus is going to be going direct. And we talked about that in the Aquarius season video. But at that point, all the planets are going to be in forward motion, which very much, increases that sense of that freight train.
Yeah.
And if you have not listened to some of our other videos, I'd really encourage you to listen to the one about the Aquarius season. I think we talked a lot in that one about the movement of Pluto into Aquarius. So be sure you listen to that one.
So, Laurie, let's talk a little bit more about the Leo Aquarius axis together. Like, what do they mean together? Like, how should we tackle this together? I mean, this is kind of what I've been thinking about.
Yeah, well, first of all, what do they have in common? They're both fixed signs. So they both have that, that kind of solid, once they're in a position, they are in that position. They're both fixed signs, which is where where their commonality is. Leo obviously being the fixed fire, Aquarius being the fixed air. This brings in a lot of the intellect of Aquarius with the incredible inspiration of fire, the intellect of air, the inspiration of fire, and bringing those together in this fixed sign. Leo's very personal. Aquarius is rather impersonal. Those are kind of the two of the things those are kind of the things I think of right off the top of my head. What about you?
Well, isn't it always funny with polarities how they are always in astrology, the polarities are always in two signs that have an affinity for each other, because fire and air work well together. They're both externally focused signs, as we talked about at length about fire, where the fire wants to go and have an effect in the world and shine a light, and the air wants to go out and have a conversation and bring in intellectual ideas. So they work well together, as you're saying, on that front. Like, air makes fire grow bigger, so that's in terms of the elements and how they work together. And then I think, like what you said, like what is different about them is just that Leo is much more personable, warm, and friendly on a personal level, on coming in and having a conversation, and really just feeling seen, and like you're sitting in front of a hearth fire is how I think of Leo. And then Aquarius is much more, maybe not as personal, but definitely understanding the bigger picture of humanitarianism and kind of wanting to, when it's in balance, lift people up and see people as a collective, see people as a community, and how humans are all sharing a lot of different things. They have a lot of things in common, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. So they have those two things. It's just that they go about them in such a different way. Like I can imagine Aquarius kind of doing an eye roll with like Leo's antics, like Leo being like, oh yeah, Graham's standing again, and Leo perhaps getting a little bit annoyed with Aquarius's aloofness, like just being so aloof and like not really engaging on a personal level. So I see that that's where there's some conflict. And then they kind of, how they work together in a chart is what we'll get more into during the impact part, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think what we should talk about now is the aspect to that polarity.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is that there is a pretty tight square from Jupiter to both ends of this axis. So Jupiter, for one thing, you know, what Jupiter's job always is just to make things bigger. It just expands the importance of things, it just expands things. So
Mm.
in this square, let me think. I had some ideas and they're slipping through my thought processes. uh, but
Well,
yeah, there is just an element here where both sides are um have a lot of yeah, have a lot. They have a lot.
well, I
Uh,
think what oh, go ahead, sorry. I just had an
No, you
idea.
go ahead. You go ahead. I seem to be lost and my mind is moving a little faster than I want it to.
Well, you gave me some ideas of the way you presented this. And one of them is that okay, so what is Jupiter expanding? Jupiter's in Taurus. So to me, it's expanding Earth element. And expanding Earth element is enabling us to be more grounded. It's enabling us to stand our ground while witnessing all of the change that the Pluto Sun conjunction in Aquarius is showing us.
Okay.
Like going, wow, there's so many things changing. There's so much conflict in the world. There's tech rising up out of, over here. And then there's just this incredible emphasis on how our access to information is changing, and there's a lot of things going on there. So there's that end of it. And then witnessing, being stable to allow you with that Leo full moon to celebrate the joy of things that are happening despite all of these really hard things, these really difficult things, and all of this conflict. To go ahead and recognize on a personal level what are the things in your life that bring joy that you want to celebrate at this full moon moment. So I think that Jupiter provides a lot of stability to see things how they really are and see the dark and the light, to see both ends of it.
And to
So,
see how big the changes are that are coming. And you know,
mhm,
a square aspect is always really interesting. And when people are first learning astrology and you learn about the square brings in conflict and struggle, and yet at the same time, without squares, we'd never get anything done. A square aspect always insists that we take actions, that we do something with the challenge at hand. And the challenge at hand is, these big changes that are coming. And how do we work with it? What can we do with it? I I can't look at this with this particular configuration without thinking of bringing humor, really working with some of these, oh my God, whatever the huge changes that are coming, and, just bringing some lightness and humor to it and working through some of the difficulties of it in that way. I've been
mhm.
watching a lot of stand-up comedy lately. And yeah, I think of that a lot when I look at this, these huge changes that are coming. And what do stand-up comedians do? They take difficult situations and they spin it into something that can bring expression and lightness and Leo
Mm,
expression
love it.
too.
I
So
like that you're bringing that into it because I think that's exactly trying to articulate the idea of like finding this maybe some gratitude. Leo could be that appreciation, joy, humor, but not so that you're ignoring the other stuff, but that you're bringing that into it and
right.
just kind of looking at the whole picture. And I think that that's the thing that's tricky. It's not saying, hey, just bury your head in the sand and let's be all like enthusiastic and joyful, like in a fake way, which I think is the danger. This is really saying, no, looking at all of it, bringing that in, and still tapping that humor, because that's what we do as humans, like that. We have that capacity to do that. So this is
Yeah.
encouraging that.
I
Yeah.
think this Leo full moon is really beautiful in just that. What you're saying is, this Pluto going into Aquarius and all of this intense stuff that is going on. And yeah, the celebration at this full moon is not to disregard that or pretend it's not happening or,
Mhm.
whatever, putting your head in the sand. It's not. It's taking those changes that are coming. Pluto, among many things, Pluto shows us what we cannot control. I was listening to an astrologer who said denying Pluto is like denying God. And I kind of like that. It's like you cannot control what Pluto brings to the table. So you might as well celebrate it. You might as well find humor in it. You might as well find a way to work with it with generosity and open-heartedness. Bring that Leo light, that Leo generosity and open-heartedness, the humor that Jupiter can bring to the table, and work with those energies, no matter how difficult they are.
Mm.
This life is not, it's not a cakewalk, as they say. We
Yeah.
all have struggles, and right now the world is in a lot of struggle as it adapts to these changes.
Mhm. Yeah, and the other piece that the Pluto brings in is like, newsflash, we're mortal. So it really brings in this bigger perspective of these much larger cycles. So I love how you said that, Lori. It's great. Like just approaching these intense topics with this type of mindset, with this type of attitude, and with recognizing that part of all of this is um okay, so as humans, we tend to not want things to change, but the truth is things must change. There's change that really, really needs to happen. And there's a little element of that, like celebrating that which needs to be changed in this full moon and just being fully present, which is also, I think, a Leo thing,
Yeah.
being fully present to that. And because it falls in everybody's chart in a place that whatever your sun and sun sign is in charge of. And we'll talk more about that in the personal impacts. But I think that that's absolutely the way. Yeah. So
Okay. Anything else before we move into am I forgetting something?
only 6 more things. Now, there is a lot more we could talk about with this chart, but I sort of think, I don't know, just getting across that idea of the earth and the stabilizing,
Yeah.
like, because there's other earth signs in here, and the fact that, Saturn is also in Pisces. And so that's bringing in a lot of the yin, the calming, soothing energy, and from that stable basis to lift up and out at the Leo full moon.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that Saturn is in a sextile to Jupiter too. So there is yeah, there is some stability in this chart for sure.
yeah. And that's, yeah, I like that connection, that sextile that's been hanging around for a little while.
Yeah,
I really
there's
like
there's a
that.
bunch of
Look at this.
trines. I think,
Yeah.
just pointing out some of
Mhm.
these
Yeah.
more positive, soothing energies that are going on in
Yeah.
the
And
midst of all this craziness.
the Venus is in there too, huh? Yeah, I mean, it's funny because there is a lot of inward energy in this chart, those yin signs, the earth and water signs. And then with trines, it's like, yeah, like they're soothing, they're holding, they're presenting opportunities. So on a wellness level, because that's a lot of my astrology focus, this is like find ways to get grounded, find ways to, make a cup of hot tea, take a hot bath, go for a walk in the woods, those little things that don't have to be long
Yeah.
to help you soothe your nervous system so that you can be available to really celebrate the joyful pieces of your life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the whole earth-based, as you were talking about making a cup of tea and going for a walk, I'm just thinking about, I collect rocks. Goodness knows why
mm,
people in my life think I'm crazy, but I collect rocks, and sometimes just holding a rock can just
mm,
ground me in a way that is really wonderful. But if you know your chart, and can look and find the area that has Taurus in it and the area that has Capricorn in it, you can kind of look at that and really understand where in your own life you can find some of those stable places right now too.
yeah, I like that. That's really helpful. Yeah, fabulous. I like rocks too.
I love rocks. I collect them so much that every once in a while I have to, bring them back out to nature and build little things with them just so I can keep collecting more. At any rate, are we ready
Okay.
to move on?
I think so. Let's talk about personal impacts.
Okay, so let's make all these lines go away and we will move on to talking about folks with Aries rising.
So those of you with Aries rising, this bright, sparkly Leo full moon is landing in your fifth house. Just a little reminder about the fifth house. This is the place where we give of ourselves unconditionally, joyfully, playfully, with great appreciation. So you're already set up to really appreciate this full moon. So let's talk a little bit about the polarity, because this full moon and every full moon brings in these two opposing energies. So that means that those of you with Aries rising, you're trying to understand two different areas of your life and how they work together. So the 11th house, where you have Aquarius, is your community. There are dramatic changes afoot in your community, as we talked about at length in Aquarius season. So this Leo full moon is bringing in the other end of that polarity, which is where you give of yourself. The 11th house is where you accept and receive love from the community that supports you. And then the fifth house is a much more personal situation where you're really just enjoying yourself, pouring yourself into something. So that's the polarity. It brings in this inner gift that you have to share, and then the community who is poised to receive that gift that then in turn gives to you. So that's it's sort of a dramatic area of life. And then you with Aries rising, you're a fiery person anyway. Like you walk around with, you want to bring light into the room. You want to pioneer new things and show new things. And so now you get to, in this Leo full moon, kind of show off your creative skills or your playfulness with kids. I always think about that, like literally being on the playground with kids and like swinging from the monkey bars with the kids, like that kind of energy.
Yeah.
Is something that you're going to want to bring in. Or the other thing I think about with the fifth house is like recreational pursuits. Like I know someone with this is an avid rock climber, so being on the rock and enjoying that and really being present to that as a celebratory moment in your life. So those are some of the things that I think about.
Yeah, I love this. This is one of my favorite polarities is the 11th to 5th house, because it's so much about it's all about giving and receiving love, giving of yourself and receiving from others. And at this time, I think the celebration of creativity, the celebration of how you express yourself, how you give of yourself, is you really want to think about it in response to the big changes that you see happening in your community, in your ability to receive. So that's the polarity. This is Aries rising people have such a strong ability to express themselves, regardless of where the sun is in your chart. It's expressed through that house of creativity.
Yeah, so as you're looking at this chart, those of you with Aries rising, think about what sign your sun is in, think about, for yourselves, and that's going to be a bunch of different ones. And then recognize how whatever that sun is, it's in charge of that fifth house. It's in charge of expressing yourself with this just unbridled joy. That's what your sun is doing. And again, there's 12 different methods for accomplishing that goal, but nonetheless, whatever that sun is, it is all about this lovely giving of oneself and creative place in the chart. So
and that 5th house can also be around issues of children, places where I think you brought it up because you talked about rock climbing, but just risk can be part of that 5th house as well. So how you celebrate yourself in those areas is what this full moon is really bringing to you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on then and go to folks who have Taurus rising. So if you have Taurus rising, this full moon is in your 4th house, and the full moon itself is highlighting the polarity between your 4th house and your 10th house. So First of all, let's get clear about what those houses are about. The fourth house is about home, family, ancestry. The 10th house is about your career, your reputation, how the world sees you, yeah, out in the world. So this is where the full moon is falling. You are in the midst of really becoming aware of profound changes that are happening in the outer world for you, in your career, your vocation, whatever that is, your reputation. There's big changes afoot there. And what you are really celebrating at this full moon is you're kind of stepping aside and using your ability. You're really celebrating how your home and your family is supporting you through those changes. There's a real need to celebrate that. With with Leo there in your fourth house, as we've been talking about this, wherever your sun is, the sun shines brightest through this house. So regardless of what sign your house is in, this is a place where you're really able to express yourself. And at this full moon, that's your job, is to joyfully celebrate your family, your home, your entire ancestral line,
Mm.
like that.
Mhm. Nice. Yeah, the other thing to think about, like we've been trying to incorporate into these too, is as a Taurus rising person, it's likely, well, your overall life direction is sort of pointed at maintaining some kind of stability, about finding equilibrium, about kind of finding stillness and calmness and, staying, keeping things stable and continuing in a certain way. So it's not the easiest to have change. And so for Taurus rising, there's
Good point.
dramatic change in your 10th house, as Lori's mentioning, like this whole idea that there's something happening with your career that's new and different and it's, a longer, slower process. But it's also allowing you to, because of so much change and because of your Taurus rising, and it's not the easiest, having that counterpoint of celebrating at the very bottom of your chart, the fourth house, your roots, your family, the people who help you maintain that stability seems highly appropriate because we're
Mhm.
talking about tapping into feeling grounded, feeling stable so that you can manage the intensity of these changes. And for those of you with Taurus rising, really bringing in however your home is supporting you. That can be family of origin. It can be your physical house that you are happy to have. It can be a place, a piece of land that you feel connected to,
Mm.
or even ancestral lineage. Like all of those
Mm.
things are the things that now provide you with the stability. So go ahead and enjoy and celebrate and, express your gratitude and appreciation for those pieces. So.
Absolutely. That's lovely. Okay, so let's move on to folks who have Gemini rising.
Oh, Gemini rising. Okay. What's happening here? All right. So for Gemini rising, the Leo full moon is shining a light on your communication skills. In a nutshell, the third house refers to many things, but one of the important ones is how you speak, how you talk to people around you, how you listen to folks in your neighborhood, like those sort of, it's always those people in your immediate sort of locale. So this Leo full moon is giving you an opportunity to tune into that part of your life, celebrate the things that you feel like you have learned from so that your communication is able to be generous and like bringing people in and shining a light and bringing in a sense of enthusiasm and humor and joy, just by the way that you speak to others. And this is against the backdrop of Aquarius season landing in your ninth house. The ninth house is the bigger picture worldview that you are developing.
Mm.
So the way these work together, this is a very important learning axis. This is how you learn. This is how you have experiences. You take on board totally foreign experiences so that you can expand and have an open-minded point of view. And I would say an open-hearted way of navigating your immediate environment. So that's some of what's going on here. The other piece I would like to mention is just that with a Gemini rising person, you're a
Mm.
person who values change and values things to be different and to move around, and you have more flexibility than the average person to weather change. So this is rather an exciting time in a lot of ways if you can make sure that you can be grounded enough to enjoy these big shifts and changes, because it really could be a soul feeding time period for you as somebody who's likes this, likes to see things grow and evolve.
Yeah.
So
It's really interesting just to think about the change going on in that ninth house, the worldview, like big shifts and changes going on in your worldview, and this moment of celebrating your ability to speak about it. And I want to just bring in the beginning part of our conversation before we got into the individual impacts, the piece of Taurus. You might really, more than most, want to really lean kind of heavily on humor, because, well, Gemini rising is going to love that anyway. But there's got to be, I don't know. I think about the big world changes and having to communicate in the moment. How do you do that?
yeah.
The addition of humor just seems like it would be quite appropriate to use in this case, with the communication area being where the moon is. And of course, where your sun is going to determine a lot about this, because with the full moon in Leo, wherever your sun is, it doesn't matter what sign your sun is in. If you have Gemini rising, that sun is best expressed through your communication.
hmm Yeah, that's really how you share your radiate your warmth. That's what I think of with the sun. So yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. Huh.
That's lovely.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on, and we're going to go to those who have Cancer rising. Boy, we got some weird color thing going on here for Cancer. I don't know
Feel special.
how that happened, but we're going to just go with that. Okay, so if you have Cancer rising, this full moon is showing up in your second house. The polarity that's being highlighted is the polarity between your second and your eighth house. That polarity itself is really about values, your values in the second house, your personal values, which can include money, resources, your own self-worth profile is in that second house. And on the other side of the polarity, we come into issues that involve other people's values, other people's resources, other people's money, shared resources, that kind of thing. But that eighth house also, has a lot to do with, how we navigate other people's values, so to speak. So you want to think with this full moon that you're what you're celebrating, what you're expressing is your personal values. And the changes that are going on in your eighth house, these big, profound changes in how you understand, how you see other people's baggage, other people's values, is really kind of reflecting, it's really offering you the opportunity to see and celebrate your own values.
Mm, nice.
So that's what you're celebrating. So yeah, bringing generosity there, bringing
Mm,
a real sense of generosity in how your values. What could that mean? That could mean make a huge donation to something you believe in. It could really have to do with something on that level. What do
mhm.
you think, Jenny?
Well, I think, that whole conversation about values, I love the way you brought that up, is like, yes, this is totally about your values in general, and how you handle other people when they come at you with their values. And then I just think the second house, it is a lot about we talk a lot about self-worth, like how you value yourself, and that's kind of the core question being posed here, about how you value yourself. But part of that is recognizing and celebrating at this Leo full moon the value that you bring to
Mm,
others. I mean, I think that that's part of it, is recognizing your own value and
mm,
recognizing this incredible resource that you offer to other people, as you just radiate your heat and your warmth and your generosity out. I mean, that's really what we're
right.
looking at here with the second house. And it's
I like that.
the second house is one of those, there's a few tricky houses, and the second, the eighth are two of them. They're tricky houses to kind of navigate and understand, because there's often like a little bit of a blind spot here in the second house where you can't quite see what value you bring to other people. And that's
Mm,
tough, because your sun, wherever your sun is, it could be in any of the other 12 signs, or any of the 12 signs, um, is in charge of this whole place that has to do with self-worth. So it's just interesting to think about, that connection of, like, you working to just, radiate out what you have to offer other people, and how it really comes down to this values place. So that's kind of what it makes me think of. Um, and also just being a Cancer rising person, Cancer rising, that's a pretty sensitive rising sign. It means you're kind of walking around the world like with the desire to nurture and protect other people, but you also tend to take on other people's stuff. You tend to absorb, so watery, So it's interesting how there's that. But then during this Aquarius season, like, you're learning more about boundaries, and you have this ability to set boundaries as long as you can figure out how to value yourself. Like, that's
mm,
kind of what the polarity is,
mm.
which I think is interesting. So I don't know. Those are some of my thoughts.
I really like how you talk about, yeah, the second house, it being so close to the first there, it is hard sometimes to see it. And yeah, really looking at and honoring and celebrating the value you are to others. And that can be a difficult thing for Cancer rising, to see their own value in a situation. I think that's a really, really important thing. And I don't know if we said it already. I might be repeating myself. I don't know. Uh, but
All
just,
right.
regardless of where your sun is, this is a place where you are able to shine that sun, regardless of what sign it's in. It shines through the house that holds Leo. So we always want to
Yeah.
remember that.
Now, I'm glad, when you're saying that too, the thing I always think about with the sun is you've just got to clear stuff out of the way so the sun can shine. That's what the work is, clearing things out of the way. So you can step more fully into who you truly are at a core level. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it probably is more difficult because of the position of the second house. There's a little more of a challenge to
Mhm.
clear that, you know, get the windshield wipers going and get that cleared off. That's
Yeah.
I think that's really important to understand. I think I know
Yes.
a Cancer rising that I'm thinking of right now that does not. Yeah, I think it's difficult to understand the value that you are to others. That's a really interesting point with that. So thank you, Jenny. And I think we're ready to move on to folks who have Leo rising.
Okay, so with Leo rising, this full moon is just bringing in the polarity between the first and the seventh house. So let's just talk for a second. The first house is the most powerful house in the system because it really refers to you, the self, and the direction in which you are moving your life is governed by the first house. So with a Leo rising, you are governed by Leo. You are governed by your sun, no matter what sign your sun is in. You are governed by that radiant energy, that ability to be generous. And you are, whether you know it or not, anyone with Leo rising is a beacon of light to other people. So, what a lot of your work is as a Leo rising person is coming to understand who you are, really understanding, getting in touch with that. So, this full moon is giving you an opportunity to really shine a light into what that is for you. Like, who are you as this radiant Leo person? So that's kind of the first piece of it. The seventh house, this is classic. I mean, the first and the seventh is the classic conundrum of self and other, that we all work with. And so the seventh house it does represent your actual partners in life, your work colleagues, your spouse, people you're in one-on-one connection with, but it also represents how you are in partnership and what you bring to the table. And the interesting part is with Aquarius season here and Pluto moving here is you are changing on some basic, identity level, like how you operate in relationships, what you want from your partnerships. Anyone with Aquarius on the seventh house is going to need a great deal of freedom in their partnerships, and it's going to be unusual. And with Pluto going in here, there's some kind of transformation afoot on an identity level. So this like Leo full moon really kind of spotlights this little moment of time that is revealing this whole landscape of change that's happening in this short little moment and then way beyond, so this is quite a powerful full moon for those of you with Leo rising.
Yeah,
So
it really is. And I think about the changes, the profound changes that you already know what they are.
yeah.
If you have Leo rising, you know what profound changes are occurring in your partnerships, or however that's playing out. You know what it is. It could be changes that are happening with your partner, with your spouse, with your colleague, your work partnerships, whatever it is, what those changes are. And this is a moment for you. This is a time for you to really celebrate your own open-hearted generosity that can make space for those changes, or that can somehow find a way to shine even brighter, regardless of what those changes are. Yeah, I love this one. I really like this one. People with Leo rising, really, what a gift. What a gift to have Leo rising and to be able to just express right there on the point of personality. It's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Lori, but I've really discovered in working with clients with Leo rising is you're not always aware. I mean, usually if you're older, you've had more time to work with it. But a lot of Leo risings, sometimes they are really shy and retiring people. And then this like Leo energy comes into the room and they're like, whoa, so there's a balance. But I also think that's interesting. I do think that speaks to a lifelong process. And those of you who are listening, if you're a Leo rising, thinking about where are you in that process? Like, how aware are you of this presence that you bring into the room?
Right.
Every time you walk in, you might be
Yeah.
super aware, you might have not much idea, like, wow.
Yeah.
So
Just,
take that
the
on.
generosity and the warmth that you
Mm,
bring anytime you walk into a room. It's
mm,
really, it's a beautiful thing. So that's what you're celebrating here. You're celebrating yourself at this full moon. Your celebration is yourself, the warmth and the generosity that you bring. Okay, so now we're going to move on. Let's see. We're going to move on to folks who have Virgo rising. Okay, so if you've got Virgo rising, this is not nearly as directly or sparkly as the last one. But here you have the full moon. This Leo full moon is happening in your 12th house. So we want to think about that polarity between the 6th and the 12th house that's being activated here. And that polarity is very much about health, about routines, about your own inner nature. You think about the 12th house is, it's considered the hidden house. We can think about it in terms of our unconscious processes, which we can think of as either psychological processes, spiritual processes. It's energy that is quite hidden away. The sixth house, on the other hand, is about our day-to-day routines that support our health, that support those processes as well. At this point, with Aquarius season, the whole backdrop of this full moon is this Pluto at this Aquarius season with Pluto just moving in here. So there's big changes, big changes afoot regarding how you spend your days. Whether that, for some of you, it may entail physical health issues. It may entail just what you do day to day for your work life. Um, it's the routines that support you. So the big changes that are going on there, what this full moon is asking you to celebrate is the internal processes, the the internal processes that support that. The If you think about, no matter where your sun is in your chart, it shines through this house. So there's some way in which I remember many years ago reading that people who have Leo in the 12th house, that they are the most themselves when they're all alone. And I think it's really it's really an interesting thing to think about. So your celebration with Virgo rising, you're not going to want to go to a big party to celebrate this full moon. You're probably going to want to do it in a very quiet way with yourself internally, celebrating the fact that you've probably done a great deal of inner psychological work or spiritual work that allows you to manage these big changes that are coming. So celebrating your own internal processes, I think, is a lot what this is about. What do you see, Jenny?
Nice. Yeah, I think you've done a really good job of addressing all the different things here because it is a trickier one to discuss. I mean, that's an oxymoron, right? To have bright, shiny, big, loud Leo in the most hidden, tucked away place in the chart. But I think one way I like to think about this too, since we're talking about polarities, is just that, the sixth and the 12th house are both on a level where what they have in common is they're both about learning. They're both about growing and learning. And the sixth house is the growing and learning, the routines that you need to do to keep everything going, the tangible, the nuts and bolts. So like, what am I going to make for lunch? What am I going to eat? Do I need to meditate? Do I need to exercise? Did I go out and walk? Or when am I going to fit that into the schedule? So it's very, depending on what you have here, it can be very regimented. And these things are definitely about, they're sort of preventative. It's like things that you do to keep everything going, And what I think about the 12th house in polarity to all that practicality, the learning of the 12th house is the big learning, the transcendent learning, the why are we here learning, the, why is this planet in the cosmos, kind of learning. So these much bigger, almost, well, with Leo, they're dramatic kind of points of views of these much bigger questions. And so what I like about these two things together is it's kind of like the 12th house brings some magic to the dryness of the routines, like why do you meditate? Well, meditation grounds your body, but it also puts you in touch with this much greater intangible energy in the universe, like just on a very simple level. So, I kind of think that that's how they work together. Like this is a learning moment. And I think I love how you've said like this appreciation for yourself of the work that you have done behind the scenes on your stuff, like that's what this is a celebration of. Like what is the, therapeutic means, the willingness to embrace solitude, that you have used in order to find more authenticity inwardly. And then that allows you to, I'm saying that wrong, but then in turn, there we go, to shine out that energy. So people with Leo in the 12th house can have a big impact on the collective behind the scenes. This might be somebody even on an administrative level who is really shining a lot of light behind the scenes of some big project or big company. That's also another way to think about it. But those are some things that come to mind. I like this polarity. It's provocative. It's interesting to think about. So
I don't know why I feel compelled to say this, but as you were talking, I remembered a book, and I'm just going to recommend it in case it hits anyone correctly here. Those of you with Virgo rising, if you have a meditation practice or have had one or would like one or are bored with the one that you're doing because there's such big changes going on in that sixth house, there's a book by Sally Kempton called Meditation for the Joy of It. And
Oh,
it
yeah.
just, it has a really different perspective. And I was just thinking of that with Leo in the 12th house, finding this celebration, this joy of doing some inner work in a different way. It just made
Mm.
me think of that.
Oh, you're making me think too, Laura. Another way to, I love that you brought that into it, but just one little a piece. That idea of like going on retreat and then being super excited, like, oh, I get to go on retreat. I get to take a break. Like maybe you've planned a yoga retreat or something that you're joining on, or a weekend away at, we live near Canada, so the Nordic spa, like things like that. Like those things are going to nourish your ability to
Yeah.
be generous with others. So that just, I love the whole thing of retreat, of like taking retreat and
Yeah.
rejuvenating that way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Awesome.
cool.
Okay. So let's move on now to folks who have Libra rising.
Okay, so Libra rising. Well, let's first talk a little bit about where the full moon is landing. It's landing in your 11th house of community. Remember, community can be those big groups of friends. It can be, little groups that you're working with at work. It can be people you don't even know who you just show up and go to your workout class with, or that when you attended the meeting about, town hall, that those people are your community. So it's a broad sweep. But what is lovely about this full moon is very simple. Celebrate your community. Those of you Libra rising, recognize what that community is, the joy it brings you, the way that you are seen in that community.
Mm.
I mean, that's really what is the beauty of having Leo in the 11th house, is how your community sees you and potentially can support you if you will let them. That's the tricky part. But this whole Leo full moon, this is a polarity. So that's just one half of the polarity. The other half is there's a great deal of change with Pluto going into your fifth house and Aquarius season landing in your fifth house. There's some change, some transformation that you are hopefully embracing to do with your creative processes, to do with how you want to generously give of yourself. So you may notice a theme here. There's a lot of stuff here about being joyful and generous and giving of yourself with this polarity, just, off the bat. Like that is just a lot of what it's about. Um, Both of these houses can be thought of as the resources you have. So the fifth house is your creative resource, your ability to express yourself in this unique way. And then the resource in the 11th house is the resource of your community, and how those just beautifully work together. Like you do things, you show up in community, the community supports you, you go back and you do your creative process of whatever you're working on. There's this really nice give and take between these two houses. And also, as a Libra rising person, what I really like about this chart is that a Libra rising person is going to really value their social
Mm.
supports, I guess, because it could be close one-on-one relationships that you really value, but it also could just be socializing in general. But you
Mm.
really, really value that with Libra rising one way or another. And it gives you an opportunity at this Leo full moon to really celebrate that piece. And if you're shy and retiring, great. I'm sure you can still think of people that you really count on, that you feel seen by, that make you feel, yeah, just seen and held.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, again, this is one of my favorite polarities. I love this fifth to 11th house. And I think of the huge changes that are coming into your life around your creativity. It could also have something to do with your children. There's some big change coming there. And with that change, you want to really take the opportunity as you are learning to adjust to the change, to accept the change, to even, dare I say, welcome the change. It's so important to take this pause and celebrate the community, the people who support you. And like you said, Jenny, I love that, just the way you talked about being seen in community. This is so, so important. And it doesn't matter where your sun is in your chart, the sun, wherever it is in your chart, is going to feel very at home in community, or, you know, not necessarily, there might be things that get in the way of that, but you can express yourself in community. That is a place where you really are able to express yourself. And like you said, Jenny, with Libra rising, that socializing thing. It's great. Libra rising with Leo in the 11th house. What an awesome combination that really sets up for you. So take the changes in the 5th house, the big, profound changes that are rumbling through, and use that energy to bring to the community and allow the community to support and celebrate you. So have a party.
Yeah.
For this new moon, for this full moon, if you've got Libra rising, invite people over that you feel supported by, or go join people somewhere. Get into a space where you really are around people that are supporting you in the midst of the changes that are going on.
Yeah, and I just, Laurie, when you're talking, what pops in my mind is I remember we got a comment at some point in our videos here of somebody not really resonating with the Libra rising one. And so what it made me think of is just having an inquiry here too. Like, if community is a place of stress and difficulty, look at that, because none of this is a perfect process. And there might be other things, of course, going on in your chart. But I do want to encourage that, because sometimes, like, whatever your rising sign or even your sun sign is, those represent places that we're really trying to learn. So just take a look at that, because sometimes Libra can be it's kind of a tricky sign in its own funny little way. But anyway, I just want to throw that in there, because, it's whatever your chart shows you. Trust that and tune into where the lessons are that you're working to learn in this lifetime. So.
Right. Yeah, and there are so many variables. I mean, these videos that Jenny and I are making here, there are so many variables, right? This is very general. Every single person has their own unique chart.
That's
So
right.
we have to keep that in mind. And right now, I'm still on my old computer, and I have a spinning wheel of, it's not going to let me move things for a moment, but that will change within a few seconds, I think. Is there anything else? Oh, here, it changed. Phew. I have my new computer, but I haven't gotten it set up yet to do all the things. So now we're going to move on to folks who have Scorpio rising. If you've got Scorpio rising, this full moon is falling in your 10th house of career, reputation, your vocational path. The polarity that is being highlighted is between the 4th and the 10th house, the 4th house being home, family, ancestral line. Given that this full moon is happening as it is with the backdrop of the Aquarius season, watch that video, by the way, there are profound changes happening in your life in the area of home, family, or ancestry. Something's bubbling up, something's changing there. And as you are learning to see it, as you are seeing it, accepting it, and beginning the very first beginnings of working with those big changes, this is a time to pause and celebrate what is happening for you in the realm of your home and career. You've got Leo up there. This is a place for folks with Scorpio rising. The career is a place where they can really shine their most authentic self. So this is something to celebrate as a counterpoint to the challenges in the home area.
Yeah, and I think those of you Scorpio rising, like Laurie, I really like how you keep bringing in this idea of Leo being where you are really open-hearted. Looks like we oh,
I
there.
don't know what happened. I apologize.
That's right. I lost my focus for a second there. Were you done? Are you, did
Yes,
you want?
yes, you go
Okay.
ahead. I'm sorry. I don't even know what happened.
That's right. So basically, I just wanted to say that I really like how you are talking about Leo as this open-heartedness, because what I think about with Scorpio rising is you have this ability in your workplace to bring this generous, open-hearted, like aura of like gratitude and making people feel seen, because I always think of Leo as like this big old hearth fire that everybody's gathering around and warming their hands around. And so you have that energy in the workplace, and so people want to gather around you and warm their hands, and feel seen. So that's really is a gift. And part of the journey for those of you with Scorpio rising is to think about, where is your own sun? What sign is your own sun in? It can be in any of the 12 signs. And then whatever that sun is doing, its job is ultimately to make people feel seen through your profession. So I'm not saying it's easy, because you might be like, what? I doesn't really resonate with that. Not necessarily easy, but nonetheless, the tools that you are equipped with in this life. And so this Leo full moon brings in an opportunity to kind of see that, and to see that lovely, warm, gregarious energy you're bringing in. And what a nice counterpoint that is to all the changes that are happening down at your foundation, like all the shiftings and movings. And I mean, you might even be moving. I mean, that could totally be a thing with Pluto moving into that area. So interesting time, and both of these houses, the fourth and the 10th, very much to do with your identity, like who you are at home, who you are at work. And that's where the fundamental changes. And that's also where it's really, really would behoove you to bring in some humor to your workplace. Let it rock, like bust it out. It's great. People are going to really need that. People need that right now, and you're going to be able to offer it in a really awesome way. So that's my recommendation.
I like that. It's just so interesting. Scorpio rising has such a reputation for, the need for privacy and all this kind of yeah, kind of closed in energy in some ways. And I love it. I was married to someone at one time, way in my distant past, who had Scorpio rising, and he was such a personal, he kept his personality kind of tight and private in many ways. And it took me a long time to really understand why, when it came to work, he was always getting promoted and everyone loved it. It's like that's where the generosity and the warmth can really shine. And it's such a gift for people with Scorpio rising to have that place where they can really bring more, open energy to. I
Yeah,
love that. That's really great.
that's a fun.
Okay.
I like your comment on that too, though, because I do see how someone with the Scorpio rising might want to kind of deflect attention off of themselves by kind of being, clowning around at work and getting everybody like shining a light there, so that the
Yeah.
attention is on their personal thing. It's
Ah,
much more. So
that's a
it's
really
much.
good point.
Yeah, because the 10th
That,
house isn't as personal, right? It's a
right.
much more outward
Yeah.
place. So, huh.
That's a good way to look at it. I like that. Okay, so let's move on to folks who have Sagittarius rising.
So those of you with Sagittarius rising, this full moon in Leo is bringing up the polarity between your third house down at the bottom there and your ninth house up at the top. So the Leo full moon is shining this big, bright, shiny, grateful light in the place of your overall perspective, your worldview. I like to think about the ninth house too, is this is where you go and you have experiences. This is a house that is tied in with your self-expression anyway. So for you, this is where you go and you have those experiences, and you can either go and travel the world and encounter foreign things, or you also can read a really good book or get transported by other people's stories. Is another way that you might really expand your mind, because that's what the Leo full moon is showing you, is this part of you that is really expanding and wants to grow and wants to take on board other people's points of views. So that's the big point. In the meantime, you've got Pluto and the Sun in Aquarius down in your third house. So this is really just showing you a place that is transforming. So how you communicate is probably undergoing some changes. It could be also that there's something in your neighborhood that's changing a lot. That's another designation. A third idea would be to do with siblings. That's another third house thing. So some big change afoot that's happening in your kind of local environment, and it's going to enable you to celebrate this big world perspective you have that is warm and gregarious and wants to bring humor in and can kind of take everything with a grain of salt. So I like that. And as a Sagittarius rising person, you already have fire as your guiding light, like you work well with fire. And you're also concerned with expanding and expanding your wisdom anyway. You're already curious about those things. So this is a learning placement. The third and the ninth house have to do with your learning. They have to do with your basic learning in the third house, and then the learning we've already talked about that has to do with your worldview. So this is an exciting, a time to celebrate the changes, celebrate the shifts that you want to see in your life and go with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that profound shift in your communication. As you're talking about it, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking a few things. First of all, Sagittarius rising, yes, you learn so much about yourself and develop that warmth and all of that generosity. You learn that through travel, through learning to understand other cultures, through religion even. So that's what you're celebrating, is that higher understanding that you have. And right now it's really being shifted and changed through these changes in communication. And all I can think about with this is AI. You know, AI, Pluto moving into Aquarius, into the third house, your communication is changing, and you can celebrate how that shift is opening your understanding on a higher level.
Mm. Yeah. I really like Leo in the ninth. It's just, I don't know. I feel like Sagittarius rising people have a real way of making people feel seen, no matter how different or how unusual they might be. Like with that Leo shining up there. That's kind of what it makes me think about. And I can think of a couple people in my life who have this, and absolutely, this is how they make other people feel from far and wide included and
Yeah,
seen and held up. So I like that about it.
it's really great. Okay, so let's see here. Let's move on to those who have Capricorn rising. Okay, so if you've got Capricorn rising, the full moon is falling in your eighth house, which is the area, kind of a deep, intense area that is about how we navigate other people's values. So these two houses, this polarity between the second and the eighth, is really about values. The eighth house being other people's values, the second house being your own personal values. So there's, given that here we are, this full moon is being so impacted by the gigantic changes of Pluto moving into Aquarius. So, being happening on the yeah, with this backdrop of this huge change. You want to think about that. What is the change going on? What is the profound shift and transformation happening in regards to your own values? Of course, that, it could have something to do with money. It could have something to do with resources, or it could be just your internal valuing of yourself. But there's some big change happening in that area for you. And as you are adjusting and accepting how these changes are occurring, this full moon really gives you the opportunity to look at how you can celebrate other people's values, how you can learn from and um, just welcome other people's values. Jenny, say something about this. This one seems challenging to me for some reason. We're going through these big internal changes around our own values and celebrating the values that others bring.
Yeah, well, it's almost like, you know, a good use of this would be learning how to accept and welcome other people's deep, difficult challenges that they have, because you're going through changes of how you value yourself.
Okay.
Ideally, you're transforming in a way where you see yourself better, you value yourself, more. You're recognizing what resources you bring to the table, and then that's freeing you up to be much more generous with other people and their stuff, because we all watch people struggle and we have our own struggles, and we can't, we don't always get a very good view of our own struggles. Like, we can't see ourselves sometimes, but a lot of times you can see someone else's struggle,
It
and you might think of an easy solution, but it's not easy, right? But
Right.
that's
It's so interesting to think about this because people with Capricorn rising, you think about Capricorn, the seriousness, and I can't tell you how many people I know with Capricorn rising who do like work with other people's money, like
mhm.
work in the banking industry and that kind of thing. And they
Yeah,
just do have this ability to almost, to bring this warmth and generosity where people struggle with their values, their stuff.
mhm.
So yeah, regardless of where the sun is in your own chart, this area of working with other people's deep issues is a place where you can really learn a lot about yourself and bring a lot of warmth.
Mhm.
Thank you, Jenny. What you just said just kind of opened my kind of stuck little mind there for a minute.
Yeah. Well, it's, sometimes it's easy to reflect too while you're talking. And then, because
Right.
actually what I was reflecting on, and you've kind of said this already, but the idea that a Capricorn rising person is that person who walks in the room and everybody thinks they're an authority. Whether they're an authority or not is a different question. But that vibe that they give off of, like, I know what I'm doing here, clear the decks, folks. And I was just thinking that part of the reason why, like, one of the secrets of success, perhaps we'll say, to a Capricorn rising person who does walk in the room and really is the authority, is that they've learned, through their own learnings, how to work with other people's stuff,
Mhm.
like how to recognize people's struggles and kind of draw them in, because Capricorn has this delegating ability, like when it's functioning well, to kind of draw people in and see what their value is and what they bring to the project or whatever it is we're talking about, and they draw people in. And so it makes them effective, and it makes Capricorn rising people able to step into that authority role that they are sort of born
Yeah.
with Capricorn rising. And again, this doesn't mean it's an easy process, and it's probably not, because wherever your sun is in your chart is a place that you're going to have to tango. You're going to have to kind of work across your lifetime to figure out how to, uncover stuff so that that sun can shine. So there's definitely some stuff that happens there. But to whatever degree you're able to do that and really see other people for exactly who they are, as is would be a key phrase for this one,
Yeah.
seeing them as is, and accepting and celebrating and embracing
Yeah.
that.
I think
Yeah.
that's it. People with Capricorn rising with Leo in that eighth house, there's the ability to see and accept other people's foibles.
Yeah.
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 That's
And by the
beautiful.
way, As Is a great Ani DeFranco song. I love that song. So anyway, my little
Okay.
side comment.
Let's move on to folks who have Aquarius rising.
Okay, so those of you with
Ooh,
Aquarius rising, it's kind of a big deal going on for you right now, with the beginning of Aquarius season, because we have that whole conversation around Pluto moving into Aquarius the same day as the sun. So that's a big shift, and that is a big change. And especially with Aquarius rising, it's like, okay, well, Pluto's been above the horizon for probably for your whole life, probably, depending how old you are, unless you're really older, but anyway, and now it's dropping below the surface, and it's dropping into the first house, which is the most powerful house of self. So big changes afoot here, and that's a much longer process. Meanwhile, this Leo full moon is just kind of a moment in time, but what this moment in time is showing you is the connection between self and other. So how you are as a self, and then how you interact on a partnership level with other people. Again, this can be, we always talk about this. This is the partner, like the spouse, but this is also a business partner. And then this is also those more fleeting one-on-one connections that you have. You go on a walk with your best friend. Those kinds of things come in here too. So the Leo full moon is giving you an opportunity to really celebrate with joy and gratitude the partners you have in your life in all these different realms, and to really see them and shine a light for who these people are. And it's really a beautiful moment because these two houses are your identity. They have to do with your identity and who you are with other people. So this is a very powerful moment in time when you really have the power to make someone else in your life feel 100% seen, held, seen, embraced, celebrated, and laughed with, not at. So that's part of this picture. But I mean, this is a big one because the first and the seventh house are just such important houses, and they really get at the core human struggle, which is self and other. So this is a moment of time where you can really look at that, and just take a look at yourself and bring some fun and humor into that.
Yeah. I think it's really is a time to celebrate your partners, whoever they are, business partners, romantic partners, intimate partners. Your partners really need to be celebrated right now. You know that there are such profound changes bubbling up inside of you, and really appreciating the people who have stood by you, who are standing by you, is something that that this kind of internal personal change can give you a perspective on how much you want to show your appreciation for them. So yeah, take your partners out to dinner, do something wonderful, do something really generous, and open your heart and show people how much you appreciate their support.
Oh, it's funny too, isn't it, with Aquarius rising? Like I was just thinking, Aquarius is such a quirky sign, and it's the one of the least understood, and it's a little bit eccentric. And so those of you with Aquarius rising, you're kind of walking around with this different and unusual point of view. And so I suspect that might be part of the reason why you really value and just can really love those partners who see you for who you really are. I think that's a really important piece of understanding yourself as an Aquarius rising person. So just want to add that.
Yeah. Aquarius rising. I love it. Okay. So moving right along, we're going to come to Pisces rising. Okay. So here we have Pisces rising. The full moon, the Leo full moon, is happening in your sixth house. So first of all, what are we celebrating? You're celebrating your ability to, you're celebrating your day-to-day routines, whether they be dietary routines, exercise routines, whatever the routines that support you, that's what you're celebrating. The polarity that's being highlighted here is between the 6th and the 12th house. And the 12th house is, thinking about the polarity. We've got the routines in the 6th house. In the 12th house, we've got our internal patterns, whether those be psychological patterns, spiritual patterns. It's kind of behind the scenes energy that really supports everything. What our internal psychological and spiritual processes are, it really holds us together in large ways. That area of your life, if you have Pisces rising, those internal patterns are in the process, the very beginning process of going through profound changes. Really, it's hard to oh, it's hard to exaggerate the importance and the changes that Pluto is bringing. So as you are becoming aware of what those big internal changes are, first of all, it's a little hard to be aware of them because they're so far below the surface. They're behind the scenes. You really want to be paying careful attention, really looking internally. And as you're doing this, what supports that internal looking is the day-to-day routines. So celebrating the fact that whatever your meditation routines, your daily walk in the woods, how you feed and care and nurture yourself, that needs to be celebrated because that is going to really allow you to see more internally what these big changes are.
Hmm. No, isn't this a funny polarity? I
It's
mean,
an interesting one.
yeah. I think, again, I mean, I think of these two places as these are places where you're learning, and you're learning to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Really, you're learning to take care of your, uh, pragmatic needs, like how you eat and how you sleep, which I know sleep is a big deal for lots of people. But all of those things that are happening in the sixth house where the Leo full moon is shining a light on those routines and practices. And because the sun, no matter what sign it's in, is ruling your sixth house when you're a Pisces rising person, that's a place where you really can shine. Like in those routines, you can shine, you can show up and be gregarious. And I just think about somebody walking into the gym with their workout buddies and just like having some laughs and having a good time while you're taking care of your routines. That's the kind of ethos of it. That might apply. That metaphor is just one metaphor of many. So don't worry if you hate the gym. um, but it's just a thought, like that idea of like this place, those being your people where you feel seen and also where you can really shine a light for other people. And then the Pluto moving into your 12th house, I mean, this is where we really talk about Pluto as empowerment and moving behind the scenes of being willing to do the work on your subconscious layers, being willing to do that, being empowered by that, and then possibly really impacting the collective. I mean, depending what you're doing in your life, that 12th house, when it's activated in a positive way, this could be, running for politics. This could be getting a big promotion at work where you're running a company now. I mean, these big behind the scenes things can also be 12th house stuff. So just thinking about that and evaluating where you fall. And, one nice thing about Pisces rising, I mean, that's a pretty sensitive placement, having a water sign right there on the ascendant. So there's a sensitivity. But the good news is that with Aquarius in your 12th house, you have the power to use your intellect to kind of get some space from your really intense, difficult patterns and look at them and look at them in an innovative type of way, instead of getting bogged down by them. So that's kind of one of the gifts, I think, of having the Aquarius placement in the 12th. So I don't know. Those are some of my thoughts. Just think, enjoy, have a good time at this Leo full moon. This is definitely a time to celebrate all and anyone who supports you in those routines, whatever they may be.
Yeah. I love that. I'm really glad you brought up just thinking about Pluto going into that 12th house, just the empowerment that Pluto can bring, and really a time of empowering your own deep understanding and the potential for that to really make a difference, not just for yourself, but because of the whole behind the scenes thing. You can really make a huge difference in the world, and people might not know that it's you making the difference.
Yeah.
That's the thing with the 12th house. At
Yeah.
any rate, I think that this has been a really fun conversation, and I
Mhm.
think we're done here with all 12 signs.
Mhm.
So this has been
Yeah.
great. I've really enjoyed having this conversation with you, Jenny, and I look forward to a million more of them. Well, maybe not a million.
1 million. Thank you, Lori. Thank you for everybody for listening. And please make some comments. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.